Hello. Yes. Good. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. 12:30 already, pouring down with rain outside. Maybe some of you are lucky enough that you've got it pouring down with snow, which would be just a change, if nothing else. Not necessarily positive, just different. That's what we're looking for nowadays, is something different to alleviate the monotony of Groundhog Day. Never mind. Nice to see so many of you. What we're going to be doing today is, I'll just wait a couple more minutes. There are quite a lot of people coming in. Is to then say, actually, we're going to be doing about redundancy and restructuring. We're going to, of course, you have the opportunity to ask questions. If you put it into the chat, we can answer those. That's not a problem. Let's see what we've got here. I don't want to do that. Sorry, just close that. Oh, there we go. Lots of people. That's excellent. I'm going to hide the people who are obviously not got makeup on, so they don't want to show us what they look like. All these shy people. I mean, some people are just being cryptic beyond belief. There's somebody called H. Is that like M or Q from James Bond? It's like, okay, that's fine. Right, let's get rid of those. That's fine. What we're going to do is, if Kathy could put the link to the Dropbox folder in the chat, that would be great. I'm recording this as always. It is a slightly different talk on redundancy to previously, because now things have changed regarding notice periods and furlough. But I thought it'd be a good idea because the vaccination program is going really well. That doesn't mean we're all out next week at raves, as we would be normally, obviously. But it does mean that we need to start thinking that actually the end of April, if not actually earlier for golf clubs, could be a realistic time that you get people back at work again, even if it's just doing takeaway stuff. So you need to be looking at what your plans are for the next 6 months, 12 months now, and making a decision, or at least gathering the information before you get confronted with the government saying, right, everybody back to work, and then your committee says, oh, I don't think we want them. That's just not going to work very well, to be honest. Okay. So we've got a question from Galaxy S6 Edge that maybe Julie could get, which is about, do we pay training on furlough at 100%?
Oh, sorry, for some reason I come up as Kathy, so I'll just change that. It's Julie here. So yeah, employees can undertake training whilst on furlough. You don't have to pay them at 100%, but you need to be careful that they're not going under the minimum hourly wage. And actually, even though whilst they're on furlough, we haven't taken into account the new increased rate as of April, it does actually come into effect for training. So check what the new hourly rates are for that age group, and make sure that the 80% you're paying them doesn't take them under that. If it does, you're going to have to pay them more. So 100%.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right, Richard. Incognito. Okay.
I'll have to find out how to change that.
maybe we could give it. I think I'm allowed to. I can rename you, and then you have to be really nice to me. So I put something nice in there and not something rude. Yes. A chat. Mark says, asks, when someone leaves, how long do I need to keep their HR details? It depends a little bit what the information is. Okay, so you need to keep your financial records. Electronically will be fine, but your financial records for 6 to 7 years. You'll be submitting accounts, so if there's any claims there. From a tribunal perspective, they've got 4 months to start a tribunal after their date of termination. So not when you gave them notice, but when the notice period ended and yet they were issued with a P45. Now, there is a delay at the tribunals at the moment. So what we're saying is that if you haven't heard anything by 1 calendar year after the date they've left, then you could get rid of their information, because the only reason you need their personal information, their personnel file, is generally to have something to fight a tribunal with. So if you've got no tribunal claim, and you would know within a calendar year whether you had a tribunal claim, absolutely, there's not going to be more delay than that, then you keep it if you've got a tribunal claim. If you don't, you get rid of it. But I would always keep, even if it's electronically scanned, details of any sickness and any accidents at work, because they can come back for personal injury claims for several years. And that, again, that financial information, in case they come back and say, actually, I wasn't paid my holiday for those years, or my pension, or whatever it was, you then have proof of what they were actually paid. So that's how we do it. Depending on the different bits of information, you keep it for different lengths of time. But if you scan it in, then it's not taking any physical space up. Okay. And if they contact you and say they want to be forgotten, again, that is to be tempered with your legal obligations to retain financial information. They can't say, I want you to delete all of my pay slips for the past 20 years because I've left now and it's 2 weeks after they've left. No, you're not allowed to do that. You have, HMRC overrides the right to be forgotten. Okay. And if they do come to you with the right to be forgotten request, tell us, and then we'll make sure they fill in the right form for that. Don't just accept an email. Okay, so that's fine. We will get to restructuring in a minute. I'll just do one more. Trish, I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Maybe if you want to, Trish can't hear us. If you want to log out and log back in again, I will let everybody in. I keep forgetting that I have to do the waiting room. So there you go. Okay, I'm going to do restructuring, and then we'll come back to the questions. Okay, because there's a lot of questions today. You guys are all really busy at the moment, obviously. Right, so restructuring. You should all be able to see the slideshow. Okay, so what you have to do, which is what we always say, and we've been saying since the beginning, you've got to know your numbers. Your treasurer actually needs to know what figures you've got, what are your liabilities, how much money have you got coming in. Some of you will be in the lucky situation that you got all your subs in when you were for the next year while you were open. Others will be going to the members now, and the members will be saying, I don't care, I don't want to come in. I'm not going to pay you until you actually open up again. So I know everybody's in a different situation. Some people will have more cash reserves savings than others. You need to know what you have available so that you know, okay, we're going to be in trouble if we have to come back and people don't go back to the clubhouse, and we can't open the clubhouse as we used to do in May, which is, it's very likely you will not be able to do that in May. Okay, there are, even with the vaccination, it is very likely we're going to still having to do social distancing until the end of the summer, which again, you have all your visitors and everything in the summer. That's going to be a problem. So have you got enough reserves to get through? Bearing in mind, at the moment, there is no sign that furlough is going to be extended beyond the end of April. Okay. What we're talking about in this session is redundancy when it's fewer than 20 employees that are being made redundant. That should apply to everybody here. I don't think if you get rid of, I mean, we're talking really about F&B rather than greenkeeping. It's unlikely to be more. If it's more than 20, you have to follow a different process. We're not going to do that here because it's not relevant to most people. But should you be in that situation, come to us and we'll talk you through the process. Okay. So for fewer than 20 employees, there is no set process. There is only what is seen as reasonable under case law, which is why lawyers get rich. So we keep up with case law and let you know what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. Okay. To avoid restructuring, you could part company with all the staff who are under 2 years, because you only have to give them notice. You don't have to go through a process. You would just say, I'm sorry, I'm making you redundant. Here's your notice period, paid in full at 100%. And but you don't have to do that. You don't have to do last in, first out, which is what it used to be. You can do that, but it is actually okay for you to say, actually, I need these people going forward. They have the skills that we need to survive. You're allowed to do that basis. Okay. Sorry, let me just let people in. There we go. Then we've got, oops, sorry, back. Let's go back. So it's not compulsory, and the notice periods, if they've got long notice periods, then yes, that protects you from them leaving quickly, but it also means you've got to pay that out. So whatever their notice period is, you will have to pay that. And this time around, this lockdown, you cannot claim furlough for the notice period. Okay. sorry, let me just get back onto that. So reasons for restructuring in normal times would be because you have a troublemaker you want to get rid of without going through a process, because you have people with long service and huge amounts of salary. Some of the clubs, particularly in house manager area, have been given sort of 3% pay increases over 20 years so that the house manager is actually earning more than the general manager for a lot less work and responsibility. You want to change the contract term so that people aren't being paid enhanced overtime. You want to shorten notice periods. You want to reduce the sick pay amount. And then finally, which is most relevant now, is the finances, that you don't have the money to get through at the moment. You need it to the country to open up. And then we're going to look about employing new people again, okay? What do you need to have before you start? You need to know what your organisation chart is now. What have you got in place now? Assuming everybody was at work right now, not on furlough. Who reports to who? How many people have you got? What are their salaries? What are their working hours? Having all of that. And what do you want to have going forward? Do you want to get rid of everybody? Do you just want to have a head chef and one waiting staff? What is it you want to have? We did have a question about what the standard structure is. There isn't a standard structure for F&B. It's whatever you need. There are specialists out there who can help you with F&B and work out what you want to do. We're happy to chat it through, but there is no set structure. It's what every club wants for themselves. So I think most of you will know Stephen Brown and Kevin Fish. They can both help you with that, working out your strategy for going forward, and then we can help you implement that strategy. Okay, and you will need job descriptions for this process, just short ones, half a page is fine, including any qualifications that they have to have. So this is usually more in the greenkeeping area that you then say, actually, we need to have them, that they've been doing the bigger qualifications in training, etc. Okay. So the process, the standard process that we use, that has never been questioned in court at all, not seen as unfair dismissal, doesn't make you subject to a 25% uplift for following the wrong process, is that it's a 3-week consultation process, okay, from start to finish. So you would have the general meeting on day 1, and you can do all of this via Zoom. Okay, you don't have to have people in face to face. You do a general meeting on Zoom of all the people who would be affected, which is a whole department, and you say, unfortunately, and we've got the script. So if you're going to do this, we've got all the script, we've got all the information you need to do this. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Okay, then you're going to have individual meetings with the staff either that same afternoon or the next morning to go through the situation again, because it will be a shock to them, even though they're expecting it. It is still a shock to hear those words. So it's then to repeat the words again, to offer them any of the roles that are still available and give them a week to consider whether they want to apply for it. Okay. After the week, you would then interview people who've applied. If they are successful, they would be confirmed in their role. If they didn't apply or they were unsuccessful, they would continue in the consultation process, because we are going to keep looking officially for alternatives to redundancy. Okay, you can't just then stop the process at that point. You have to keep looking officially for another week, and then you would have the final termination meeting, which is the 3rd meeting in the process, and say, unfortunately, you are going to have to be made redundant, and you would be giving them their notice period and their redundancy pay. So they have, you need to provide them with the correct letters with the correct wording at each stage, and you need to avoid saying you are redundant. You say you are at risk of redundancy, always at risk. It's never redundant until the final one. Okay. Record every meeting, which is easy to do if you're doing them on Zoom. That's not a problem. Absolutely record them. If it's on the phone, record it on a separate device. So you do the call on the phone, on loudspeaker, and you use a different phone to record it. Okay, so that you have actual words that are said rather than just the gist, because there is a potential that they could ask for the notes of it or a record of it. And if you say, here's a recording, and it's word for word, obviously, what everybody said, then you don't need to worry about it. And we haven't had many people, have we, Julie, who've asked for anything other than that recording. It's been quite fine. But if you don't do it, you can bet that they will be wanting notes and you won't have made any notes, and you need to have the notes to prove you did the fair process. Okay. The redundancy pool, Julie, do you want to have a go through that one?
Yes, so as you've got the first point, a pool of one person. This is something we really try to avoid. If you have just one person, they can claim that it's very unfair and they have been targeted. The only case when we can say it's fine for one person is if there is truly only one person in that department doing that job. So there is nobody else that could be affected. Their job's not going to anybody else. It is a true redundancy where the work has disappeared. Then you could have a pool of one. But please, obviously, do discuss that with us first. A pool of many is definitely safest, because then you can say everybody was at risk. It's been a fair process and we've gone through this. We haven't singled anybody out.
So that, and when we have our conversations with you, we will ask you to justify the reasons for the size of your redundancy pool. And it's not because we're not trying to support you. In fact, it's because we're trying to support you so you never have to justify this to a judge at tribunal, because the judge will not see, oh, well, it's just obvious that it's only them. That is not a legal argument as to why they're the only person in the pool. So, you don't want to be having to justify at £350 an hour to a judge why you felt that only one of the greenkeepers, who happened to be the one with the worst sickness absence record, was the only one to be made redundant. Well, not made redundant, put at risk of redundancy, and then made redundant, and everybody else was left unaffected. So that's why we're doing it, because not because we don't want to help you, but because we want you to avoid having those horrible conversations with judges. Okay, so this is, so when we start the process, actually, we've done over 60 redundancy processes since last April, which is way more than we usually do. And in them, actually, the employees have been remarkably well behaved, much more than we thought they would be. But what they can do is they can go off sick. Okay, that's less of an impact, obviously, at the moment if they're on furlough, but that is an issue. Potentially, they can raise a grievance, which we would then deal with by going through the grievance process, and they can start early conciliation claiming constructive unfair dismissal. Okay, all of those we can deal with. You just need to flag it up as soon as anything comes in. It doesn't mean, for example, if they raise a grievance or they go sick, that we have to stop the process. We can do things quite quickly in parallel, and it hasn't delayed it with any of the processes, particularly at the most a week. It doesn't mean that it's going to be delayed for months. So we can do that. The costs of redundancy, you need to be paying them their salary for 3 weeks consultation. Now, if they're at work, you'd be paying them as normal, okay? If they're on furlough, you can just bring them back to work for the meetings that you have. Now, actually, I don't think we did that last year particularly. I think we just did the meetings on furlough, didn't we?
Yes, we did do the meetings on furlough, but then you were allowed to do notice period on furlough, so it was safer. But now, yeah, I would pay them just at 100% for those meetings.
Yeah, exactly. So you would, if the Zoom meeting, the general meeting is usually about 15 minutes long. They haven't been very long ones. You would pay everybody at full for that 15 minutes. The rest of the time they would be on furlough, okay? And it would be tax and NI, but you can have them on furlough for the time in between meetings in the consultation period. Okay, so that's straightforward, hopefully straightforward. Okay, and then once you get to the termination bit, you have to pay them their notice period at 100% of their salary, and that is subject to tax and NI. You have to pay them.
You actually have to. Sorry, you actually have to take them off furlough for that period. They can't be on furlough, and you claim you remove them from furlough, and they become back as a normal employee for that notice period.
Which is why, different to our presentation on this last year, we now have pile-on in, because the only advantage to leaving them on gardening leave for the notice period last year was that you could claim furlough. Now there is no advantage to leaving them on gardening leave. I say no, hardly any. It's much better to pay them in lieu of notice, pile-on, and get them off of payroll as quickly as possible, because if they then raise grievances, we have a bit more flexibility in how we deal with them, rather than having to go through the full process because they're no longer an employee. One of the reasons for keeping them on gardening leave is if they have a lot of holidays still to take. As we've been saying all the way through, and I'm sure some of the questions in the chat will be still about this, you should be getting all people who are on furlough to take their accrued holiday to date while they are on furlough. So to put them on holiday while they're on furlough, so that when you come to have that either termination conversation or you need them back at work, nobody's saying, oh, well, I've still got 20 days left to take and I'd like to take them in 2 weeks' time. Now, you don't have to agree to that, but the problem is it's just going to make it very difficult. So that's why we're saying make sure you give them the notice, get them to use out the holiday, and then you won't have to worry about paying it out when you terminate. Okay. And also that termination conversation, we discover often that time off in lieu, toil, agreements have been made verbally, usually in the greenkeeping department. It's amazing what the greenkeepers get agreed to them. That is never documented in writing, but obviously it's been done for years and years, but nobody thought to write it down ever. They may claim for time off in lieu for however many hours. If you have no way of proving that they didn't do that, you're probably going to have to negotiate, but worst case, pay it, because you can't prove otherwise. This is why with our clients that we work on putting any time off in lieu agreements, that they have to take that time off in lieu within 3 months of it accruing, so that there isn't this big hangover. So if they said now, okay, well, I've got 60 hours time off in lieu, it's like, well, that can only be from the last 3 months, and there's no way you have time off in lieu that much. So you have a way to deal with it then. Okay. So you've paid the notice period, you're paying them pile on, so you pay it in one lump sum, but it's subject to tax and NI. Then you've got statutory redundancy pay, which is tax-free. Okay, it's 1 week's pay or the cap for every completed year of service. So the cap is currently £538 per week tax-free. That's up to the beginning of April. Usually every April that cap increases. So and it's whatever the cap is at the moment of termination. Okay, so if you're doing this to get it all finished before the 1st of April, you'll be working with 538. If your process ends after the 1st of April, you'll be dealing with a higher amount as a cap. Okay, there is a weighting for the amount on that cap for how old you are while you're working there. So if you are under 21, then you get half a week weighting for the years under 21. If you're over 41, you get 1.5 times a week's wage. Okay, but it's whichever is lower. It's the 1 week's pay or the cap. Whichever of those two is lower is the amount that you take. Okay. On the redundancy calculator front, using the age, length of service and weekly wage, the maximum at the moment that anybody can get is £16,140 tax-free statutory redundancy pay. You are allowed to pay up to £30,000 tax-free to an employee, but on the statutory redundancy pay, the maximum you can that would be required to be paid out would be £16,140. Okay, if you wanted to pay more than that, that would be your choice. There is no legal obligation to do so. And if you go in and do a redundancy calculator on the internet, you'll bring up the government website. That is the only calculator you should be using, and you can put the details in and you can find out how much any of your staff would be entitled to, or how much you would be entitled to if you were made redundant. Okay. You can ease the process by offering voluntary redundancy. You would have to offer more than the statutory amount to persuade them to do that, because they are signing away their job. So you can give them a signing bonus of 1,000 or an extra month's pay. You can remove the cap, the 538 on the week's pay. And to balance against that, you need to still be aware that it is counted as a dismissal. It's not them resigning, so they could still claim for unfair dismissal after this. We haven't had anybody do that who went for voluntary, but just be aware that legally it does count still as a dismissal, and they could turn around even with extra money. It's a weak case, but they could turn around and sue you. Okay.
Just another point, Caroline, on voluntary redundancies, you must offer it to everybody. So you cannot just cherry pick and say you're only going to offer it to the awkward employee that you want to get rid of or the older employee. That will be discrimination. So if you're offering it, it goes to everybody.
Right.
You don't need to, you don't need to accept it. So if somebody accepts voluntary redundancy that you would like to stay, you don't need to accept their application for voluntary redundancy.
Yeah, you are allowed to reject those, so that's fine. If it does go pear-shaped, we can always do a settlement agreement. A settlement agreement replaces the old compromise agreements. They went out a few years ago. Settlement agreement is supposed to be more positive about this. And it is that you are then paying them what they're legally entitled to, plus an amount on top of that for them to sign away their rights to sue you. Okay. Those, again, we've done, I don't know, 40, 50 of those in the past year. Only had one person not sign it, despite the fact that they would have got more money from if they had signed it than they got on the statutory basis, but that's their choice. Everybody else has signed it. And that's a process, again, that we manage for you. We liaise with their solicitors, who are obviously always claiming that their clients are innocent and being victimized and really fantastic at their job, and therefore can they have more money. We manage that process and deal with the snotty emails so that we get a resolution that works for both sides. Okay. Yes, so this is just reiterating that you can't claim furlough for the notice period. You can claim it for the consultation period, but not for the actual meetings. And the actual meetings are going to be short. Like I said, the general meeting is usually 15 minutes. The individual meetings, again, 15 minutes. The interview, if they apply, is going to be 15, 30 minutes, depending on the job and how many people have applied. And then the final termination meeting. So you're talking about, in a 3-week period, maybe 2 to 3 hours paid work at their 100%, and the rest of the time on furlough. You can do that. So those times when they're actually interacting with you, which is a work issue, they're paid at 100%. The rest of the time they're paid at 80%, but only for the consultation period, not for the notice period anymore. Okay. The communication through furlough is not having to do the flags, as I learned when I was a Guild Guide, but we can use Zoom very effectively through this, and that also means that we can be on those conversations with you to answer any tricky issues, any questions that are made, and we can make sure that nothing is inadvertently said which would be used against you. So we can absolutely do those with you. We don't do them instead of you, we do them with you and make sure that goes all smoothly. The critical time is to launch it correctly, the general meeting, then the individual meetings. If those are all going smoothly and there's not been any issues, we usually then leave you to get on with the rest by yourselves, because it's going to be at the beginning that we're going to have the issues flagged up to us. You can do it on Zoom, telephone, you can send out all the letters via email, and then you can actually send it out by Royal Mail, recorded delivery, if you want to do that. And that's our least favorite one. So again, repeating what we've said all the way through, you should get the private email address of all your staff, so that no matter what, we can communicate with them, because they shouldn't, I doubt that the F&B people have access to email anyway, work email. They wouldn't have one usually, but you need to be able to communicate with them and to send the letters. It's so much quicker than sending it by snail mail. Okay.
And also on the email point, beware, you shouldn't be using their work email address whilst they're on furlough. So we have had some clients sending them the invite to the meetings to their work email address, and of course they haven't got the invites, because rightly so, they shouldn't be checking those. So make sure you send it to their personal email addresses.
Yeah. Good. Okay. So let me just close that bit. Right. So there's quite a lot of chat there. Let's just start through. I'm going to see if there's, right, I'm going to skip some of the questions in the chat and try and do the redundancy ones first, and then we'll go back to the other ones. Okay, so Mark, can you still request furloughed staff take holiday before giving them appropriate notice? Yes, but you're going to have to give them twice as much notice as the length of holiday. So if you start doing that now and making sure there's no backlog, then should you need to give them notice, you know that they've taken most of it already, again, you can put them on gardening leave, but unless you've got a clause in their contract saying, which our ones would, that you will be taking any remainder in your gardening leave period, you would then have to leave them on gardening leave until they've taken it. You couldn't do the pile-on, because if you do pile-on, you will have to pay it out. Okay, so it swings and roundabouts, and we're happy to talk through what the best thing is for your clubs. Okay. Do holiday restructure. So Scott, should we start a restructure? Can we make someone redundant while they're on full furlough and without offering them another role? Scott, let's have a chat through that. It would be unlikely that it would only be, as we said, one person who's at risk of redundancy. It would usually be a department that would be at risk of redundancy, so F&B or the Greens, and then, but we'd have to discuss it through with you. If it's just you've got one cleaner employed and it's only the cleaner that needs to go, who's going to be doing the cleaning? I'm just thinking of who would be in a pool of one. I mean, I'm going to say, just brutally honest, general managers are usually in the pool of one. So committees usually do that. They do it the wrong way, but they define that as a pool of one. But everybody else in the club is like to be in a pool of a department. And if a cleaner's going to be got rid of, who's going to do the cleaning? Oh, it's a cleaning company. Well, that's a TUPE transfer, not a redundancy. So Scott, if you contact us, does it make a difference if it's a contracted employee versus zero hours? No.
Sorry, just go back to Scott's,
Sorry.
and there's a bit on there that says without offering them another role. If you have any available roles, you must offer them to the employees, because you have got to be trying to avoid redundancy or risk. So, for example, we've had it for clients where there was a Greens role and we were removing F&B, and some of the F&B people did actually apply for the Greens role. Now, if they're not qualified, you don't have to give them the role, but you've got to give them the opportunity. So that is important.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. It's going to be a lesser rule, so it's unlikely they'll apply, but they may. So
yeah, and it's making sure you offer it to them and they have the chance to say, no, I'm not interested. Great, not a problem. Yeah. Or if they, like Drew said, we did go through the interview process with the people from F&B who were interested in Greens, and they were actually, the GM was really surprised at how proactive the F&B person was. So should there be a need in the future, he's probably going to get in touch with her, but she wasn't quite qualified enough to even start doing the Greens role. But it does bring out the people who are still committed to helping the club and possibly enthusiastic, as opposed to the ones which are usually the ones who've been there, for 30 years and quite belligerent and take the money. So there you go.
Thank you.
I'm going to go back up because I'm losing the overview. I'm sorry. So Trish, David, our pro is leaving and we are employing a new pro. Okay. The assistant will be staying on. Where does the assistant stand regarding future furlough once a new pro takes over? Both pros are self-employed. Okay, so the assistant is employed
it depends
by the
who
pro.
they're employed by. Yeah, if the assistant's employed by the pro and they're moving over to the new pro, then the assistant would 2p across to the new pro. So when you have those conversations with the new pro, you're going to need to tell them that there's an employee that will then be their responsibility. If the assistant's employed by the club, then they just stay there.
No, the assistant's employed by the pro.
Yeah. So that would.
So TUPE is relevant, and furlough would be okay on that basis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, you can, even though they weren't on the new person's payroll before the end of October. TUPE actually overrules that, and you can actually keep them on furlough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Good. Pauline, about to send the letters requiring staff to take holiday before March year end. Okay. Can I send 3 letters on the same day so I can give different notice periods? Also, I assume I can ask them to take 4 days each week if needed. Yes, you can do 3 letters, separate letters, to give them the right amount of notice to take the holiday. There's no restrictions on the number of letters you send out. And you can get them to take 5 days, 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever you want every week, as long as you give them the right amount of notice. Yes, Judy, you agree?
Yes, yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. I mean, I think it depends how you're doing the notice, but you could put it all in the same letter and explaining that, this is notice for this bit and then this is notice for this. So yeah, all 3 separate letters, whichever's easier.
Okay, we've done one of Scott. Susan, can we tell staff that we need to reduce their pay while in COVID times? There's no real need to reduce people's pay at the moment because you have furlough. If they're working, they're working. If they're on furlough, they're on furlough. I mean,
I suppose crucial to that is, can you tell staff? You can't tell them that they're reducing the pay. You can ask them if they're willing to reduce pay to avoid redundancy and get their agreement, but you can't just impose it without going through a whole restructure process. So yeah, if you're trying to avoid restructure redundancy as a first step, you could ask them and see if they all agree to it. But to Caroline's point, whether they're going to in the current environment would be highly unlikely. But yeah, you can't tell anybody.
Yeah. Okay. And then anything to do with restructuring or holiday pay, the key is that the people who are covered by all of these rules are the people who are on your PAYE system, who you pay net of tax and NI. They're not freelancers like or self-employed like the pros. So the key thing is not what type of contract they're on, but how, in the nicest possible way, it's not between 0 hours and permanent hours, it's how long their service is. And if you're paying them through PAYE, they have the full entitlement to employment rights. So you do need to make sure you're dealing with everybody the same way, and not assuming that 0 hours who've been with you for 10 years can be just dismissed, because that's not the case, unfortunately. Okay.
I think on that point with 0 hours, we really would encourage you, for the university students or people like that, to terminate them at the end once they go back to university, because we are finding quite a few clients have still got these university students on their books, and so they're involved in the whole restructure process because they've got over 2 years. So yeah, it's quite a good habit to get into, is just to terminate and keep rehiring.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Got lots of questions today, which was nice. Good. What I will do is we'll put this video into the Dropbox. Kathy, if you could put the Dropbox link into the chat, that'd be great. So this video will be in the Dropbox and on YouTube, and I'll put the presentation as well into the furlough Dropbox so that you can all access it. Please send it on to your committee as well to make sure that they know what they need to be doing, and they don't have the rather quaint idea that you just sit down with people and say, look, mate, there's no job for you. It's okay, though. You'll be fine. Off you go, and expect that to go well, because it's not going to go well. And some of the committees are very, very old school, as in old public school about this. So I'm just saying, just need to let them know what you need to be doing, and you need to be thinking about it now. I'm not saying you have to do it in any way. I'm just saying if you need to go and check what you might need to do. You've got to make sure that the club survives, and that might mean a bit more pain for a few months, and then it's fine from September. Okay. Good. Otherwise, any problems this week, come back to us. We're here as always for you. Otherwise, we'll see you next Thursday. Okay, take care. Bye.